Last night in Virginia was a terrible night for the Democratic Party, as conservative Clintonite and corporate-backed candidate Terry McAuliffe was absolutely destroyed by a Republican private equity guy named Glenn Youngkin. So Youngkin, of course, ran on the non-existent lie, the critical race theory, which excited conservatives. Conservatives love it. They eat this stuff up. Despite the fact that, of course, no conservative can ever really define critical race theory. In fact, there's a viral clip that has been going around that I've wanted to show you, and it basically shows you exactly how much conservatives who criticize critical race theory actually know about critical race theory.
What's the most important issue in the governor's race here in Virginia?
Getting back to the basics of teaching children, not teaching them critical race theory.
And what is critical race theory?
Well, I'm not going to get into the specifics of it because I don't understand it that much, but it's something that what little bit that I know I don't care for.
And what have you heard that you don't?
Well,
that you don't like?
I'm not going to, I don't have that much knowledge on it, but It's something that I don't care for.
You can almost see the gears turning in this guy's head. Like, I don't like critical race theory. I mean, I don't really know anything about it, but it's bad. It's critical, and it's race, and it's a theory. Now, let me tell you, I just don't feel comfortable with it, even though I don't know what this is about. Yeah, okay, great. That right there is why a lot of Republicans turned out. But where were the Democrats? Now, that's an important question because Democrats, look, Virginia is a blue state. Virginia is generally where Democrats actually do very well. And of course, that's the home of the defense industry, etc. And so there's a lot of Democrats in that area. What the hell happened? Where were they? Well, you're not going to be surprised that they decided not to show up. I know. So now, the thing is, Joe Biden won that state by 10% in 2020. So where were the Democrats? Again, I've got a couple of ideas of why they decided not to turn out. But first, let me go to the Democratic Party cable news response to this, of who they're blaming for this unmitigated disaster, this dumpster fire of election. They're blaming progressives. Of course they're going to blame progressives. Who else? As Common Dreams reports, several conservative Democrats, including Senator Mark Warner of Virginia, John Tester of Montana, claim that progressive refusal to allow the bipartisan infrastructure bill to pass the House was to blame. He says, I've got to tell you, in Virginia, where we've got a gubernatorial race tomorrow, that would really help Terry McAuliffe out a lot if we had been able to notch that win. Now, remember, what they're talking about, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, is the corporate bill that is stuffed with handouts and pork for big corporations. The bipartisan infrastructure bill contained nothing for the American people. It is strictly physical infrastructure, which, by the way, is important, roads, bridges, etc. But it also has, like I said, handouts for corporations, fossil fuels, big oil, etc. In fact, the absence of climate provisions in that was supposed to be supplemented by the human infrastructure package that was in the House that they were also supposed to vote on, which would, negate those investments in fossil fuel by actually doing something about climate change. Now, a lot of that stuff, unfortunately, has been stripped out by corporate Democrats. And so, look, for the bipartisan bill, again, remember, corporations and lobbyists are salivating over this bill. They want it so bad. I'm sure, though, cable news will tell you that we're sure that the American people really cared so much that corporations are allowed to get their pork. No, come on.
Please.
Sorry, wrong one.
Give me a break.
That's what it is. Come on. No, here's the thing. What the people actually want, what Democrat voters want, is the human infrastructure bill. They wanted the $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill. Now, they wanted it before it was pared back to almost nothing. And if you look at the polling, for example, the Medicare expansion, lowering drug prices, paid leave, child tax credits, raising taxes on billionaires, those were all incredibly popular with the voters. But look what happened. Almost all of that is stripped right out. Now there's more. Here's John Tester. He says, quote, and this is directed at progressives. We haven't gotten anything done. That says enough about their strategy. Oh, their strategy. Oh, it's so bad. Oh, yes. What about your strategy? Your strategy of let's do absolutely nothing. Not even the bare minimum. Let's do nothing and then somehow win. We're going to run on Orange Man bad. So now, Politico reporter Heather Cagle also tweeted after the race that was called that Democratic members of Congress are already texting me blaming progressives for the debacle in Virginia. And a senior aide to another House Democratic moderate told Axios' Hans Nichols that, quote, it's clear passing a historic bipartisan infrastructure deal months ago would have energized President Biden's numbers, and that House progressives who stalled that vote had hurt McAuliffe. Another one. New York Times reporter Blake Hansel also adds, some in Biden land are already asking themselves if the president has allowed himself to be tugged too far to the left in office. And those voices are likely to get louder now. What kind of fresh hell have we landed ourselves in? When cable news and as well as establishment media and corporate-backed politicians are all sitting there going, oh, golly gee, if only we had passed the bipartisan pork bill, we wouldn't have been so, we wouldn't have lost in these places like Virginia. Again, the pork bill that only gives everything to corporations. My God, man, we're in the bad place. I swear we're in the bad place. Maybe we all died in 2012, and now we're all in hell right now. Seems to be the only explanation of why this keeps happening. And sometimes being a progressive feels like pushing a boulder uphill, and every once in a while, Joe Manchin comes over with a sledgehammer to knock the boulder right back on top of your head. That's what's going on. But again, they literally had in Terry McAuliffe the most corporate establishment man backed with billionaire dollars. And he ran on Trump. He even ran ads for Youngkin. This is amazing because so he goes and pays for the Democratic Party, paid for ads for Youngkin, telling him his voters how close Youngkin is with Trump. You idiots! You ran ads for your enemies. Supposed enemies at this point. And of course, they ran on Trump bad and then got absolutely crushed. Just crushed. And now, again, they're blaming progressives. And so now they're coming up with, well, it's defund the police. Obviously. Yes, it was defund the police because defund the police lost in Minnesota. How much police reform did we get? None. Absolutely none. And it turns out, look, unfortunately, defund the police is an unpopular slogan because people don't understand it. The cable news media rails against it. And so right-wing media rails against it. And nobody actually knows what that means. And so for me, again, defund the police just simply means, yes, we're still going to have police. But guess what? They're overtaxed, overburdened with the things that they have to do. They should not be sent to do wellness checks on people. They should not be dealing with people with mental illness. They should not be doing any of that stuff. We should defund those programs. I'm sorry, not those programs. We should defund the police and fund programs like after-school programs, like poverty prevention programs, which again reduces things like crime, and then, fund social work, healthcare, etc. Again, you have police budgets in big cities that are bigger than some countries. I mean, come on. This is what's going on here. This is what's good. But no, it's defund the police. It's defund the police. That was the problem. And by the way, here you had another situation that they're pointing at. And they're saying, oh, see, this is an example of how you got too far left because India Walton, India Walton was the Democratic nominee for mayor of Buffalo. So now she's a socialist. She ran a good campaign. And what happened? Byron Brown, who lost the primary against her, a Democratic primary, worked with Republicans and establishment Democrats, did a write-in campaign, and successfully won a write-in campaign. And they said, well, obviously, because she was too far to the left. That's why this write-in campaign, oh my God. So, you know what's funny? Whatever happened to vote blue no matter who? What would happen if, since like this person's the nominee, you're supposed to vote for them so you don't let a Republican win? Oh, no, that doesn't count. That doesn't count at all if it's a progressive that wins the nomination. And look, during the 2020 primary, during the 2016 primary, I've seen all sorts of messages from establishment, Democrats and supposed liberals or so-called centrists that are like, if Bernie Sanders wins the nomination, I'm going to vote for Trump. I'm going to vote for a Republican. I'm done with this party because they're too far left. Ridiculous, absolute ridiculousness. It's almost like, as I said, blue no matter who only applies for whenever a corporate Democrat happens to be a nominee. Oh, but there's more. Anderson Cooper. So we're going to go to CNN here. And we've got Anderson Cooper asking, again, if this is a result of the Democrats going too far to the left.
How much of this is a message just the Democratic Party that it's too far left? I mean, that if you're the Squad or if you're, someone who's been calling for defund police or socialism or democratic socialism.
I wonder if Terry had been able to stick on a message of economic progress, family leave and minimum wage and that kind of stuff, and maybe we wouldn't be making this argument. In other words, there was an economic message from the Democrats that was available and was necessary given the rising costs. But what happened is we pulled out of our own federal bill all the family leave stuff. You're undermining the economic message for Terry McAuliffe and leave him with Trump is bad and vaccine mandates are good. I don't know that it's an up or down vote on progressive politics.
All right, so look, Van Jones actually made sense there when he said, no, we have an actual economic message here. Except that, well, at least we would have had one had we not gotten rid of everything that was popular in that bill. They took everything that's remotely progressive out of the bill. And by the way, there was actually a tax cut that was added in to the Build Back Better, the human infrastructure plan that would have given a 5% tax cut. Which would have given a tax cut to the 5% of Americans, the top 5%. Really? And that's the salt deduction. Canceling that. So, look at that. Here we go. And by the way, they also browbeat progressives into try to voting for that corporate bill, even when Joe Manchin hasn't committed to voting for it. Pramila Jayapal, who's the so-called leader of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, says, oh no, we're going to vote for both. Actually, no, we're going to take it on faith. Joe Biden tells us that he can get the votes. So we're just going to go ahead and we're just going to vote on the bipartisan bill before we get the vote on the other bill, even though we haven't had Joe Manchin say yes. And don't worry, we trust him. No, my God. And so understand, progressives are not to blame for the loss of Terry McAuliffe. But at the same time, they should get some blame for not fighting. Congressional progressives did not fight to keep these provisions in that would have been incredibly popular. Had they kept the stuff in, had they put some red lines down earlier in the negotiations months ago and overruled people like Joe Manchin and went to his state, went to West Virginia, went to Kyrsten Sinema State, Arizona, and embarrassed the hell out of him, and we had gotten this passed, you think Democrats would have lost? No. Very, very unlikely, because guess what? People want these policies because it will, basically help the material conditions in their life get better. It will improve them. But no, we can't do any of that. The progressives do not have organization. They do not have leadership. Jayapal pretty much gave Manchin everything he wanted and is saying, oh, it's historic. Historic change. Historic change. No, it's not historic. By the way, again, this is massively pared back. It's 1.7 or 1.85, whatever, trillion dollars. Again, has almost nothing for the American people. There's a couple of things like, oh no, don't worry, we got negotiation, we got drug prices back in there. Okay, what's your drug price plan? We're going to allow the negotiation of the prices for 10 drugs. Maybe at 30 by 2028. Ooh, oh wow, ooh, progress. Transformational. Now look, I'm not saying the child care stuff isn't good. I think that's great. But there's not much else in there that hasn't been means tested or completely tossed out. I know progressives, they're just trying to add some stuff back in, like, oh, we're going to put this back on the table. But again, the framework here is still essentially bare bones, and you don't have Joe Manchin, who's going to be on board for any of this stuff. So, and by the way, if you decide to give the Democrats, the corporate Democrats, their bipartisan infrastructure bill, well, then that's it. Your leverage is gone. It's just gone. It's gone. And that's exactly what's going to happen. And progressives, they're falling into the trap. They're just walking right into it because they're the worst negotiators ever. Now, that said, look, I'm criticizing progressives, and it comes from a good place. Why? Because I think progressives are in good faith. I know some of you don't think that way. They think, oh no, totally sold out, corrupt, the system has corrupted them, they have been co-opted. I don't believe that. I do think that they are acting in good faith, but I think they're acting in too good a faith. I think they mean well, but they've unfortunately cut themselves off from progressive media, and now are listening to corporate media. They've fallen into the groupthink of Washington. It doesn't make them bad people. They have lost their way. They have absolutely lost their way. I think they've succumbed to the pressure and been browbeat into submission by all the pressures that are around them. And maybe they've even been convinced or convinced themselves, oh, if we help Biden pass his agenda, then maybe they'll see that, and give us a favor in return down the road when we try to pass our agenda. You see, I'm trading favors for favors. See, I help Biden with his agenda, then he'll help us with our agenda. But again, that's Lucy with the football. They're never going to do that. And if you give them the bipartisan bill, they're going to pull the football and they're going to laugh in your face as soon as you give away your leverage. And that is the problem. That's why we're losing. And again, going back to these losses, which portend some very bad things in the midterms, notice it's not progressives that have been blocking Biden's agenda. It has been corporate Democrats. It's been Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema. And yet the corporate Democrats and the mainstream media, they are blaming progressives anyway. And the party is unfortunately going to continue turning to the right. It's disastrous. That said, as bad as this news is, there is something that directly goes against their narrative. Okay? Progressives do win. Now, look, we've had some losses. Buffalo, terrible, terrible news. However, what you're not hearing a lot of is 70% of the DSA-backed candidates in this election cycle yesterday won their elections. Now, these are local elections. There are an additional 30 seats that are now filled by DSA-backed candidates. And in Tucson, Arizona, a proposition to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour in the state where Kirsten Sinema is from, who thumbs down a $15 minimum wage proposal, passed with over 60% of the vote. What happened? Progressive policies win. DSA-backed candidates. They don't win them all, but they do win when they run. And so that's the lesson here. It's not progressives, it's not going too left that loses. It's not having any principles. That's what loses. And also establishment pressure. So again, while establishment corporate Democrats lose in places like Virginia, you do have victories here. And they may be small, but they're victories nonetheless. So take that for what it's worth. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.